So hi, everyone. Good to have you all here. I'm Groot, Senior Customer Success Manager at Software Improvement Group. And we'd like to welcome you all back to the Ask Me Anything sessions.
So I'm Asma Oualmakran. I'm one of the security consultants. So we have a whole team of security experts at SIG. And our core task is actually helping customers secure their software, also help them achieving top-notch security by integrating everything in the process, and also kind of help and teach security experts and developers in those teams. And what we also focus mostly at is security from inside out. So our core is analyzing code and looking for potential risks in the code base itself. So that's what's mostly different about us in comparison to a classic pen test, for example. So that's where we come in. For today's AMA session, this is something that gets requested by clients quite often. How can I use Sigrid in my process to check for compliance? How do I make sure that my code comply to certain standards, to my own policies in the company, for example? And I will try to give you a short introduction, some few slides, and then we will do a small dive into Sigrid. Will show you around the functionalities that we have in Sigrid to support you in this venture. And then after that, as Mark mentioned already, you can ask me any question, also outside of security, of course. But I will try my best to to answer them as good as possible. Security is still my bread and butter, so anything outside it might not be as deep as my security knowledge. So first of all, what is security? Security is often related to a sense, like a lack of threat. That's what most people describe security as. And for this presentation, we will go with being protected against threats. So the lack of threats doesn't mean that there's no potential for threats. So that's why we want to be able to protect what's important to us against certain attackers. But then we might ask the question, how do we achieve that? Like, what are the ingredients to achieve security? And that actually exists from 3 ingredients. So first, you need to know what are the threats. What is something that might be a risk for you? And from that standpoint, you then can look at certain mitigations to help prevent the threats. But those mitigations, you can actually codify them into requirements. And those requirements, that can be functional requirements for software, that can be a policy, that can be a governance model. So on very different levels, you can actually try to achieve secure software. So it's not only in the code base, but it's all the whole process and the whole company working in symbiotic relation with each other to achieve secure software. I already listed a number of ingredients, but where do we help as an organization? And where can you actually take action as an organization to achieve secure software? So the first part is your governance model. Make sure that everyone in the company has a sense of the rules that you need to have in place to be able to achieve business goal, be cost efficient, but also achieve security. And achieving security can be one of those business goals. And then on the complete opposite side, we have the practices. The practices is everything that has to do from code inception, design, and so on and so on. So from the software, so the moment you write software, you also have to think in function of achieving the objectives that you have as a business, achieve secure software. Those combined will then create the life cycle of the software. So the software has multiple stages, and in the life cycle, you can actually have certain practices in place to ensure that your software is developed very securely. But then you also have to know how, if you are complying to those practices and to those lifecycle rule sets that you actually are using. And also you need to measure to know what you have there. And that is where Sigrid comes into play, of course. We can measure code. We can also identify potential threats. And that information you can then use for your governance model, policies, practices, and compliance models if you have that in your company. Now we go back to the development lifecycle. This is how generally the development lifecycle of every company looks like. You have your analysis phase. You want to know what you're going to build. You're going to design it. Then you're going to try to develop it. You go into testing phase. If everything gets QA'd and gets green lighted, you deploy it, and then you go into the maintenance phase. When you look at this diagram, you see there's actually nothing integrated in there for having a security practice. So that's why I want to introduce something that's called DevSecOps. And DevSecOps actually tries to match every development activity with the security activity. So at the analysis phase, you're also not going to say, these are my functional requirements, but you're also going to define non-functional requirements. And one part of that is the security requirements. If you have a login page, one of the functional requirements is you should be able to enter a password, for example, but then the security requirement is the password needs to be having a certain length and certain characters in, and so on and so on. So that's the phase where you're going to define these things. In the design phase, you're going to do multiple things. You're going to identify your threats. What are the potential risks of my application? What are the attack surface? How can somebody interact with my system in an unintended way? Those are the questions that you should ask at the moment. And by asking that and integrating all those mitigations and kind of calculating in the risks, you will achieve security by design. That's the main goal, being able to secure your software from the beginning. At the development lifetime, you're going to scan your code base. So continuously scanning, making sure that you are implementing secure code best practices, engineering best practices, but also making sure that you're not using any libraries that's already vulnerable at the moment that you're building the code. Because if your packages are dated and vulnerable at the moment you're developing, yeah, it only gets worse the longer that you wait and deploy the system. So that's really important to keep track of that. In the testing phase, you can also integrate some security testing. So that means more dynamic type of things. So you can also do a dust scan. You can also do a pen testing, because then you have a product that is runnable and you can actually check for security vulnerabilities there. Then you go in the deployment. Deployment is the phase where you really have to pay attention to the security configuration of your environment where the software lives in. So that's also one of the places where we would also kind of try to do container hardening if you're using Docker containers, for example. And then in the end, you go into maintenance, continuous scanning, continuous testing. That is one of the things that we advise to do. And also here at SRG, we can provide you support in this. So Sigrid can help with scanning all the artifacts from development phase and keep on continuous monitoring the moment that it's deployed. And we can also integrate with Polarion, one of Siemens tools, to also support the threat modeling phase and support you in that security by design. Now, the moment that we start scanning the software, we will generate findings. We will find stuff in the code base. And there we also need a process in place. So I will try to explain a quite simple process. So Sigrid has found a vulnerability, a potential vulnerability. Then you need to make a number of decisions. So first of all, you need to decide if the vulnerability is actually exploitable. That's a really important step. If that's not the case, then you have a false positive and there's no issue. You just can continue on with your life and everything is happy. But in the case if something is vulnerable, you have a refined finding. So the finding, there's a consensus that this is something that you can exploit in your software and you are at risk at the moment. So what you then can do is decide if you are going to fix that vulnerability. Sometimes it takes too much effort or it's quite impossible to fix that vulnerability. And you can also have a very easy fix, for example. Most of the time you then decide that you will fix the vulnerability because it doesn't take too much effort. But if you have a case where it is too much effort or it's impossible to fix, you will have to explain why you're not fixing it. That's a really important part of the process. And then you're going to evaluate. Do I accept this explanation? Is this explanation valid? Yes or no? And the easiest case is we don't accept it, because there are contra arguments that's saying like, we can fix this and it is not cost inefficient to fix this. So then you will go back into fixing it. But if you are deciding on not fixing it, you will accept the risk. But then we also have a number of rules in place to monitor this. You cannot endlessly accept a risk. Sometimes yes, but most of cases no, because the situation continually changes. There you have to track and monitor everything for evolution. So you have to revisit the findings that you have accepted and revisit them if either the risk profile has changed. It might be more serious than before, or you can see that, yeah, the situation has changed. Now we can actually fix the finding. So this loop goes back into, do we accept it? And then we have the complete story, how to handle the findings. And I will show you shortly in Sigrid how those different aspects that I've shown you in the slide deck works in Sigrid. If you give a moment, I will stop sharing my screen and go into my browser.
In the meantime, a question that came into the chat is if the slides will be sent after the meeting, and they will be. So yep. Others that might have this question, we will send out the slides afterwards.
Okay, perfect. So this is our well-known Sigrid environment, where we have all the risks projected to you. So we will focus mostly on security, and I will pick one system that's very useful for a demo. So we go to this system, and here we have an overview of all the risks that we see, not only for security, but we also have maintainability risk, architecture risk, and so on and so on. One of the things that you might use for your compliance or your security KPIs is the objectives. So for each system, you can set a certain threshold of when a risk is no longer acceptable. So you can add certain items. So for open source health, so the open source packaging, here it's set to having a maximum of a medium risk for freshness. So it shouldn't be outdated too long. We don't accept any license risks. So things like an AGPL license and so on is not acceptable. And then for security, we can actually edit this into the maximum security vulnerability is, for example, medium. So you don't want to have any critical or high vulnerabilities. So some standards actually are pushing for that. So that's a way to keep track of security violations that are having a higher threshold than you would expect in relation to certain policies. And yes, I can cancel this. Done. I can go to the security dashboard. Here you have the OWASP top 10 filtering, so categorization. So each finding that's in the system is categorized by OWASP top 10. What you also can do is we do support a number of different models. So one of them is like the CWE top 25 most dangerous software. Then we also have the PCI DSS, which is very useful for companies that are using credit card information and need to secure them. And another interesting one is if you are steering mostly on CWEs that are not acceptable, if you use the ISO 55 model, you will see a list of CWEs that have been identified. So in this case, you can also do a quick search on on checking if certain compliances are met or not based on CWE. And you can even go into a finding. So we have this potential risk, and then you can actually look at it. We have an explanation. This is completely AI generated in a general sense. We use best practices, documentations, and then we add an explanation to it. If you don't understand the code snippet quite well because you're not the author of the code snippet, you can also use this AI generated explanation of the code snippet itself. So it's live generating everything you need to be able to make a good judgment call. And then in the end, if you take everything into account, you can edit the finding, you can give it a different status. You can say like, I will fix this because this is very critical. You can accept the risk, and then you have to go in that feedback loop that I've shown you. Or you can say, this is a false positive and I will not need to be fixing this. So this is a very, very quick run through Sigrid. So Mark, I will give it back to you.
So a number of questions coming in from the audience, which is fantastic. So I think one, given that you're already on the screen, there was a question about an audit trail for a finding. So can you see the audit trail somewhere and who refined what?
Yeah, here below we have the button, show audit trail. Yeah, this is of course a very bad example. Let's go with something that does, because it's a raw finding, so it doesn't have an audit trail. Let's see if I can get into a better one. Let's go back. Let's go to, I think we have one. No. Go into injection. Yeah. So yeah, this is of course a test system. So we see that the audit trail. Maybe I should just create an audit trail with one of the.
You always see when you do live demos, right? There's always something that that's with it. But indeed, I think what Asma, while she's finding, I can maybe talk. There is indeed an audit trail for a finding, so that shows that once you create a, like once someone changes a finding or changes or changes a status, for example, from raw to refined or to false positive or anything, it shows when that happened, who happened, who did it, and also if there's any remarks on that, that will all be shown. It's also if a new file, like if then the system gets scanned again, it contains these refined statuses. So what should happen is if you mark a finding as a risk accepted once, then once you kind of do retrigger a scan, it should not come up as a raw finding again, but it should retain that status of false positive or risk accepted for that sense.
Yeah. So what I did now is take a vulnerability that was marked as critical, and I changed the label into info, so making it completely no risk. And here you see that my name pops up, changing the impact from critical to info. I also changed the remark, and I also changed the line numbers. So that's the every action that I just took into changing this finding has been logged in the audit trail. So, but I will change it back so my colleagues are still able to use this. Then
now very much. We can now see your screen is very much zoomed in.
Yes, I need to.
But in the meantime, I saw another question coming in through the chat, and then there's a few other questions that we can answer through the Q&A. The first one in the chat is it possible to report on all accepted findings? And there's so I think that's possible, and Asma, you can show it. And there's another question that came in which kind of relates to this, and so I want to bundle them. The question is, how often should we revisit the accepted findings, and who should we do that with?
Yes, two good questions. I will first show you how you will report on the risk accepted. So I would change it into its original state. So this is the standards page. You have your OWASP top 10 filtering. What you can do is you can filter on status. And if you filter on status, you will have the different statuses that are occurring into your system. And here we have the risk accepted. So in this case, there are no findings. So I will take one of the other findings from here, for example, and then I will change the status into risk accepted. That also will be saved into the audit trail. And if I go back, maybe also refresh the page real quick. If I go back into the status, I have here risk accepted. So this is then the list that you would revisit. How often should you revisit? That depends on which policies you need to adhere to. What we advise is to do it at least once a month, because in a month's time you already have two sprints generally. So a lot of things have changed already. So that's also a good time to have it in like right before you do the next flights of sprints for that month. With whom? It depends on your organizational structure. If you have security experts, for example, that also are tracking compliance, that would be one group that you could be discussing it with. Secondly, developers are also potentially part of that group because they know the code best and they can also make better insights. So if you then come into a situation where you can easily fix that, the developers will be the people to know that. So that's also a good way to include them in this process.
Makes sense. That's a great question. I'm also trying to answer some questions in the chat. But another question that came in is, and I think actually you already touched upon that, and we have a poll on that, so I kind of want to tie them all together. Is you already talked a little bit about security policies, right? And that's also something that I talk a lot about with my customers, because every customer is different. Every customer security organization is a little bit different, and policies can change a little bit between organizations and how they're structured and who gets them, essentially, who sets them up. So we also had a little bit of a question for you, and then I'll try to go back and answer the questions that are in the chat as well. Is do you guys know currently what your security requirements are? Because that's something that we hear a lot from customers like that who maybe haven't defined that yet. Some do, and especially for the customers that haven't defined them yet, there can sometimes be a question of, okay, but who takes this first step? Is this the security team? Is this the development team? Is it a combination of both? So that's why, and I see questions coming in. It is very, very interesting, the answer. So I'll end the poll in, let's say, 10 seconds and then show you the answer. And then I think, Asma, given the response, maybe like for you to give some advice on a question, who should set up security requirements and how can that process go in a company, and how have you seen that work? Okay, I'm gonna share the results, and then you can talk about that.
There are quite some people that don't have security requirements in their company. That's quite
don't
interesting.
know what they are, right? I mean,
yeah, of course. But that's quite interesting to see. So so first of all, everyone is responsible for security at their level. So we have like the overarching company goal, and they have a certain goal they want to reach that can be translated into business governance and just a governance model. So they are using that to make correct business decisions and relate that back into items that you need to do and actions that you need to do as a company. And then you also have the policies, and the policies should actually reflect what the governance model is actually requiring to do. Policies are a way to measure if you are in line with the governance, and who should put that in place. So that can be a specific body inside the company, like a body of security experts that are doing some security analysis, compliance requirements, and so on. It can be legal. So you have also certain policies that you're required to follow depending on what type of software you're actually building, or for which type of sector you're actually building. And it can even be the developers. It can be that, okay, we are building software that's doing certain sensitive information handling. So the policy for our group, for our development team, for example, is that we require the software to behave in a certain way. So the main answer is it depends. It depends on the organization, but everyone can actually play a part in that. So the security, building secure software is a hive mind type of activity. Everyone should try to achieve that in their own way and on their own level.
Yeah. Maybe also kind of I work a lot with the number of customers, some here. I won't, but what I see happen quite often in practice is that you have like bodies like a center of excellence, or in certain companies they call the software quality team, or generally like a body of people that is a little bit more involved with security and governance and sort of good quality practices from a software development perspective, that have that conversation with the security team at that company, sometimes with legal involved, but typically it's the security team and kind of that let's say overarching body, and that they together come up with the security policies and the security requirements. That's something that we see happen quite often. At SIG, we can obviously play a role in that, because obviously we see these types of conversations quite regularly, more from a best practices perspective, obviously. And what we would then want to do, and what we would want to help you with afterwards, is how do you then translate these requirements into the objectives that Asma showed, so that you can track it on a portfolio level, but also on an individual system level, depending also on the metadata of that system. Because I can imagine, and that's also something that we talk a lot with customers about, you might have slightly less strict rules for a completely internal air-gapped on-premise system compared to a open customer-facing system that holds personal identifiable information. So you also want to make sure that you use that layer of metadata to impact, to kind of influence the security requirements. So you can make a good balance between being as secure as you can be and want to be, but also making sure it's manageable for the teams to actually achieve that. Am I saying anything stupid, Asma?
No, it was completely correct. It's more practical than my it depends answer. So
there's also a question from the chat, and that has to do on a little bit more the setting up of Sigrid. It's like, can we have some demo on adding a repo and configuring it end to end? And I think that is quite a large question. I'm not sure if we can show it today, also because we typically work with CI/CD tooling and kind of making sure that it plugs it into the pipeline, and then you can do to make sure that, you know, every time that the customer does a commit or a pull request, they get feedback. So kind of setting that up in a demo environment on the fly is a little bit of but maybe explaining more on a conceptual level is how do you add a system in to Sigrid, and what are some of the steps to configure it?
Yeah, so yeah, you mentioned the keyword CI/CD. That's how we try to achieve continuous integration into your own pipeline. So we have an open source project on GitHub, where we do have the CI/CD pipelines and the scripts available that you need to run on your site. you of course have to have a contract with us and be in contact with our support, because then we will communicate how to kind of create tokens, get your tokens, accounts, and so on in order. So normally what would happen is you would get a Sigrid account, and from there you can get the API keys and so on, and that you can configure on your own site. And what that happens is that you can configure that in one of your pipeline phases, and depending on how often you want to scan, each pull request, for example, or like each time you deploy something, the location where we plug in Sigrid might be slightly different. But yeah, we can do it fully automatically. And doing it live now, I don't have the access rights, so I'm very sorry, I'm not able to do that. So, but keep in touch with our support. They are the right people to help you out with setting this up on your site.
I've also listed the name and the company of the individual, so make sure to reach out to this person, so that we can set up maybe a session where we talk like step to step. I think it's important that indeed, you know, we connect to the pipelines. We try to make it as a seamless process as possible. I think it's important for developers that they can get the feedback right in their pipelines where they are actually working. And then obviously for other stakeholders who might not be in that pipeline, think of the security experts or a product owner or a tech lead, or, you know, maybe just upper management. We have the Sigrid platform that provides you with the insights kind of on a system level and even on a portfolio level to see kind of how are we doing, but also how are we trending, and are we kind of are we reaching our set goals, and is the team are we actively moving towards that? Cool. I see some more questions coming in. I'm also wondering, Asma, did you have final slides as well, or did we end up with the demo just now? I also want to make sure that we.
No, we end up with everything.
Perfect. Yeah. So another question is a little bit about compliancy, and customer says I need to be compliant with NIS2. But I think it goes a little bit also with other compliances. For example, in the Netherlands, we have the BO, but there's also certain industry compliances, industry regulations. Like, how does Sigrid typically help with that?
Yeah, so one of the things that we do best is identify vulnerabilities. So if your compliance, if you need to be compliant with NIS2, for example, there is one of the items is that you need to have a scanner available, just scanning your code, and also being able to report in time on certain vulnerabilities. So that's something that Sigrid can help you with, to have that continuous scanning. And it will also help you review the findings, of course, because we can identify the specific locations of certain vulnerabilities, have some first indication of risks, of course, but of course, like you also need to always add your context to it. For other compliance might mean criticals and high vulnerabilities should be fixed within a certain set of time. We are also able to track the age of findings. So if a finding should be closed within 2 weeks, you can also look at the all the high risk findings and then track and see how long ago they have been created and have been detected. So on a different level, you can actually so everything that touches upon the scanning, finding age, triaging findings, deciding on impact, and that's all items where Sigrid can help you with.
With that said, I want to thank you all for your time today, and have a great afternoon or great morning if you're in the US.